I am recording this. The reason is because since last we try to do a basic and advanced class every quarter, and I started a kind of a YouTube channel to record not only the training classes that I've performed, but I'm also trying to add, additional, maybe shorter type videos, all pertaining to DBC finance. And I've had pretty good feedback on it so far. I will, excuse me. Obviously, I will, after the training today, I still have to edit last week's basic class, or I don't really like calling it basic, but that's what we call it. It's the debt size refunding, primarily focused. I've just been so busy. I haven't had time to edit all that up and post it. But we'll do the same for today. And this helps also, just in case, if you have a colleague that wasn't able to attend, if because there is quite a bit of information, there's only so much you can kind of potentially absorb. You'll be able to go now and view, or this entire training session, and we just kind of found that it's been a lot more helpful than anything. Instead of, it used to be, well, if you missed this training, then you may have to wait another 3 months. So let me just start off by kind of telling you about myself. My name's Cade Boone. I've been with DBC, for a long time, since '99. And pretty much everyone in our group has been around at least that long. Our head of our product manager, Jason Nutter, he's been around a lot longer than I have. Sid and Bernard have been around, I would say, within a year or two after I was hired. So that's kind of the front line of finance. We obviously have a bunch of additional people who are kind of our backup and so forth. So we have a lot of years experience. So pretty much it's rare that we ever get any kind of support question that we haven't heard before. I think that's kind of more than anything what separates us is our support. And I forget sometimes until I have to deal with, say, my cable company or phone bill, or my cell phone carrier, or just how bad sometimes support can be. And our support hours are this is Eastern time, 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. And it's not, but what we try to do is, it seems like there's always at least one of us that kind of looks at support that falls outside of the 9 to 6 Eastern, Monday through Friday support time. If you send us your file outside of support, there's no guarantee that we'll get to it. But just know that a lot of times we will. There's not a guarantee. And we've, every once in a while, we'll have a client that forgets that and is so used to getting a response no matter what time. When he doesn't, then it's kind of, we have to say, hey, just because we've been able to answer you at 8 o'clock or on the weekend or whatnot, that doesn't mean that's a guarantee situation. Excuse me, allergies. So, and what you'll probably do, or what you should do, is just get this. If you haven't done so, I'm assuming since you're in the advanced class you have, but just in case, um, I'm trying to follow a lot of what's covered in the project finance tutorial, but it's not limited to that. I always try to add, little tips and tricks and so forth, built that's not covered on the tutorial. And but if you haven't, make sure tools preferences, you're going to want to put your company name. That will show up in all the reports. So if you ever see prepared by, and if it's not your company and it says DBC or whatnot, this is where you change it. Print preferences in the general tab. And then internet settings is what you're going to want to put your name, company email, and your company phone. That way, whenever I'm just going to this old, actually, I'm just going here. If you're ever in a file, and this is the best way because what happens is when you go to help email data to DBC, you can either say the entire issuer, meaning, this advanced issuer, if you've created 100 different series under it, it sends everything. Or you can just say, hey, just send the 2018, and if there's anything connected to it or it's relevant to it as well. And that's more applicable, say, like a project finance. So if you have a project finance and we have a new money and a refund, and you go to the project finance, you send us your project finance and click current document only, it will send project finance module with the new money and refund and everything that's connected to the refund, everything relevant. So you'd click OK, and then you would type in whatever the problem happens to be, right? So I can just say, training, ignore. And it will tell you on your side that size or whatever happens to the module will be successfully sent to DBC. Okay? You can also add the email to your toolbar. If you don't see it whenever you run your program, you can always, in the area, the toolbar, right mouse click, go to customize toolbar, and this is where you can add and remove. And you can add spaces and so forth. Okay. So a lot of times your toolbar may look different than a colleague's. I would say from that, if you are working for a firm and all of you, we get this rarely, but I think someone's coming in. Maybe someone's coming in. No? Okay. Excuse me. But anyway, that would be sometimes we'll get this. We'll say that, oh, I have a colleague that has their preferences are different than mine. Well, a lot of times it's a system preference, which you can go and you can click export, you can save the .sys file, and then you can import it. But that's kind of a nuance that's generally not really covered. But the point is you're going to always want to email us your file, not, about DB. This even gives us, here's links, internet, here's the email. I would not advise emailing us at finance@dbcinc.com and then attaching your data file, only because when you go through help email data to DBC, like the example I just showed you, it doesn't really send a .df2, a data file. It sends a .dfx, which is basically a subset. It's everything, all your personal preferences and everything from the systems, like let's say you went in here and you changed bond rounding to no rounding. And your question is, how come my interest is slightly off from, numbers I'm trying to match? Well, if you send us through email and attach your entire database, what happens is when I open it, if my system preferences are different than yours, they update to my system preferences. Also, if I have a different version of the program, it opens up showing in my version of the program. So the question could be, how come my interest is this? I open it up and go, well, no, the interest is, no, I'm getting this. So if you send it through help email data to DBC, I can go into that tool's preferences and see, oh, your system, you changed it to no rounding as an example. Okay. So anyway, just kind of get that through. Today, what we can do is open that back up and kind of like going over a week ago, from each database, you can create as many different issuers. I wouldn't let this confuse you. I know it says issuers, but the .df2 is a database file. And within each database, you can create multiple issuers, as many as you want. It's up to you. I would say if you're going, if you're starting off and you've got a bunch of actual refunded series and you're going to do a refunding, I would put them under the same issuer. So for example, if you created, let's say 50 different, or let's just say 25 different refunded series, actual series under this ADV issuer, and then you do another 20 over here in the basic issuer, and in either one you create a refund case, you're not going to be able to pull in or import automatically actual series that are from a different issuer. So a lot of times it's not a big deal. You can copy fairly easily from one issuer to another, but if they have the same short names, then one can override the other. So then you have to go in and change the short names, and depending on how many you need to copy, basically kind of letting you know in advance, look, if you've got 10 different issuers and you've got a bunch of actual series in each issuer, creating a refund case in one issuer, you can't just automatically view or import actual series, refunded series from other issuers. Okay, just to let you know that in advance. Anyway, so these are just a couple that were created. I'm going to just actually delete that. I'm going to leave the refunded series here, and we'll create some as well. So the first really our main example of, and that's kind of when I went back and we call it basic and advanced. Don't really particularly care for those terms, only because let me make sure everyone's in. Okay, good. The only reason I don't like to call it that is because it's kind of subjective, right? Like advanced, well, just creating a project finance and putting in, say, for example, what we're going to do, a new money and a refund, you know, that could be very advanced, or people, when they think advanced, they think, oh, it's a lot more complicated. And well, it can get a lot more complicated than even a new money refund type multi-purpose deal. Same thing with basic. If you've never created something before, it's not really basic. So, but the quote advanced class kind of assume that you've created debt size, you've created refund scenarios. So we don't have to necessarily discuss, okay, here's how you first create a bond component and so forth. All right. So this will, and again, this is all going to be recorded and um, put on for you guys to be able to go back and view. And also through help tutorials, project finance, we do have a new money refund example, because that's kind of that's a very common type multi-purpose deal. There's many different types though. But I think what's good about this example is it will show you, okay, how do I create a proposed series, a new money series? How do I create refunding? How do I solve a refund with level savings, for example? All right. And so level savings, and then the objective. So you got the refund, you want level savings, and then overall, you want to wrap the new money around the refund to produce overall level debt service. So you got more than one solution objective, right? You want one, I want level savings for the refund. And then overall, combined, I want level debt service. And this will also show how we create expenses that can be whether or not they're calculated across the board and allocated, different ways of calculation, different ways of application, and so forth. So getting to that, in the advanced, kind of like every, or at least this, a lot of Windows-based products use up and down arrows. You can always, obviously, we would need to, if you wanted to create another issuer, right? Short and long name. So you can create as many different issuers, and within each issuer is where you would select and then click new, or hit the F5 key, pulls up a menu, or right mouse click, kind of like any other Windows-based product. And so we select the issuer that we're going to start creating our new money, our refund, and then within the refund is the proposed refunding series, and the actual series, the bonds we want to refund. So if I go new, so what we could do is first create, I would also say this, if you know you're going to do a multi-purpose deal, if you know you're going to create a project finance, most likely all you really need to do is pretty much enter or create the bond components, and this might not be a new money refunding. You may have a taxable series, a tax exempt series, right? Where they're both proposed. You may have multiple refundings, multiple proposed series. The point is you can have as many different series as need be in a project finance module, multi-purpose deal. But if you know it's going to be a multi-purpose deal, especially if you're going to want to calculate, let's say, issuance expenses, and you want them in aggregate, or calculated across multiple series and allocated a certain way. Well, it's really good to, if you do know that, to perhaps create it, all those expenses, all those funds on the project finance module level instead of the individual levels, because depending on the individual levels, proposed series, refund cases, actual series, you create it there. Depending on how you create it, you may have to basically go through, delete it, and start, kind of start over. And I'll show you I'll show you all those different ways and so forth. So let's do this. So in this example, we're going to have a new money wraparound refunding. Okay. Like we talked about refund, we're going to hopefully get some kind of a savings structure, level savings. And then hopefully overall, we can wrap the new money around the refunding and produce overall level aggregate debt service. Okay. So if you know that going in, great. You could say, hey, when I go in, I'm going to create the new money. I don't I don't have to create the project fund yet. Let me just create the bonds and so forth. So series, you can call it, you know, 2025 new money series. By default, proposed. And if you were here last week, there will be some things that I will repeat. Just it never hurts. Um, just remember all the default settings is either based on what's most commonly created and or off of industry regulations, regs. Um, so, for example, it wouldn't probably make sense if we had some kind of a, if the status was a template, right? But this is a new money proposed. Click OK, it should go right in. I would say this, get used to, or if you can, Control S. Now, I have a kind of a slow, this laptop, which I don't use too often. It's a fairly slow laptop, or it can be. I did Control S, and you can see it pop up. My other computer, it's so quick you can't even see it. Like the hourglass is so quick. You can tell only by looking below. You'll see the series where it's saved to. You can always go in, file, save. I will also say in Tools Preferences, we do have if you have a newer version, an autosave option where it's every certain amount of minutes, tell you how many times the autosave files. Here's where it's the auto recovery. We will get that sometimes saying, hey, I've been working on, maybe they have an older version of the program and it doesn't automatically save. How do they recover? There's a way of doing that. But I would say, you can enter a lot of information in 15 minutes if you're really working and you're just nonstop. It's even happened to me. I mean, kind of the joke story I always tell is, and it's true, many years ago, I was, I wasn't practicing when I preached, only because this is when we had in-house trainings. I would save it. Anytime you do something, save it, and you don't basically save it whenever you think, I don't want to have to re-enter this information in if something happens to my computer. Well, we were doing consulting, or I was, with a client, and I was putting in all the information in the office. The computer froze up, and I mean, I wasn't upset. I had to kind of laugh about it because I didn't practice what I was preaching. So, yeah, it's real easy. Control S. That will do a quick save, and that's if you do want it to save. But anyway, going forward, again, general bond information, the bond components, project funds, so forth. But knowing this is a new money, it's going to be part of a financing. Could you create the project fund? Because it's going to be calculated based off the new money, allocated only to the new money. Could you just create it in here? Sure. The only thing is that I try to stress is, if you're going to be calculating on a project finance level, the less you have to go into each individual series, saves you It's a lot more efficient, right? Now, this is a new money refunding. No big deal. You may have to go in the new money if you don't remember, go into the proposed refunding. Okay, whatever, that's fine. But you may end up having a multi-purpose deal that's got 10, 20 different series that are in the project finance. Well, the quote, old days or the older model versions years ago, if all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to make a change on something across the board, you would have to go into each individual series and make that change. Whereas we've added so much stuff on the project finance level, you can go and stay on the project finance level and then make changes to any particular individual series without even having to go into it. You create a project fund in the new money, for example, most likely you just have to go in there and make that change. But that's up to you. Just wanted to let you know. So if you know, well, I'm going to have issuance costs for the new money and for the refunding. If you ever enter issuance cost here, I try to, when I do trainings, I try to tell everyone I would say unless you're doing it's not part of a financing, it's just a very vanilla type deal. And it falls under one of these three categories. I would probably stay away from creating in here. A few reasons, so if I did 250, there's a few reasons. Except one, if you ever do go into this series, you have no idea if you've entered in issuance costs, right? Two, it only allows you to enter. It's not very flexible. It's limited. It has to be dollar per $1,000 par amount, percentage of par, or some kind of an amount. And then last, if you enter in, and I see this sometimes, let's say you've got 10 different cost of issuance, for example, and you've entered in and taken all this, written it out. Well, it's part of a financing, and you go, okay, I entered all this information, but I want it to be calculated on an aggregate level and then allocated, say, proportional by par to the new money and the refund. Well, because it's not an icon, you cannot just cut the icon and paste it into the project finance. Basically, I have to tell you, you need to go in here and delete all this and then create it, in the project finance level, or at least it needs to be created as an icon. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And that's kind of the key thing. Whenever you see any kind of an icon in the series, most likely you can right mouse click, cut, you can paste it into the project finance. That's if you need to. Example is, say, issuance expense, where you've already created them on the new money and the proposed refunding, and now they're not supposed to be. You don't want it to be calculated on an individual basis. You want to calculate it, say, on an aggregate basis. Then you can cut and paste it pretty easy and no big deal. So going back, general bond information. So we can do 7/1/25 and then 1/1/26. Remember, anytime you see a blue font color, that's information that you've hard coded. I think this is a lot more important, and a lot of times I touch on things like this because if we get a lot of support, I try to interject, kind of common issues from our clients. That way, hopefully you'll remember. If you do, you'll go, oh, I remember that. I need to do this. What I think more importantly, you want to know when you calculate finance, you want to know what information the program produces versus information you've hard coded. This is a lot more apparent. Like, let's say, we'll get a file sent and they'll say, how come I don't have level debt service first period? Well, almost immediately I'll go to the bond component and I'll see some kind of an amount hard coded in that first maturity. And it could be zero. It could be, something other than zero. Basically, you hard code in something. You're telling the program, I don't care if this is optimal or not, this is what I want. And a lot of times that's the case, say like with the cap I, right? You'll go, okay, I want to hard code zeros for these particular maturities because I don't want to produce principal. That's fine. And then later on, you forget that and you're looking at your debt service or your solution or your net debt service report, and you're going, how come I don't have level, let's say, aggregate debt service? What's going on? And you forgot, oh, I hard coded zeros. Okay, well, I'm not going to produce level debt service in those years. So information you've typed in versus information results that are produced by the program. Again, anything set more times than not, they're semi-annual, 3360. You don't need to make that change. I would say anywhere in the program, hit the F1 key. And I touched on this a week ago. Before I even was at DBC, a lot of the programmers. Now, when I did start DBC, we did get, clients would phone, we'd get phone calls and we'd answer. We'd have to try to figure out, funny enough, how to resolve their issues over the phone. And then finally, as a last resort, they would send us their entire database. I mean, it just, looking back, I don't know how we were able to make it work, just because it's so easy now. But the programmers before me, they answered the phone. Well, typically programmers want to program. They don't like or want to spend a lot of time on the phone. So luckily, they tried to make in any area of the program, you hit the F1 key, they tried to make it as detailed as possible. That way, at the time, they could say, here you go, press F1 right there. Because someone will say, well, is this does this count on a leap year? It's 366. Press F1, interdate basis. And you can see down here, actual divided by 365 or 366. So sometimes we'll get that. Hey, on an actual, what about a leap year? Does it count 300? Yes. Actual 365, obviously not. It's on a 365. So anywhere in the program, it's not like, Excel or, the paperclip, or you have to type in and then get a big library of stuff. And then at least with me, I get frustrated and then give up. No, hit F1. I would say anywhere in the program, you're not exactly sure what something means, or should I enter it in here? I would say a lot of times press the F1 key. It will pop up and it will tell you, here's what it means, here's what it is. And then you still don't quite understand, that's fine. I mean, that's why support's here. A couple other things, FAQ, these are frequently asked questions. So we don't, through the years, we didn't just go, hey, let's just create this and let's just make up. No, these are, it's been a while since we've added. I think we've almost covered, and this is a pretty common, what is a general fund? Can I remove it from the debt service report? And we'll go over that, when we start producing stuff. So some of these can be very basic in nature, and some can be fairly complex. Anywhere from how do I enter in cabs, few steps, right, to, a taxable tail, meaning cover, let's say your tax exempt, your issuance costs are on a 2% limit. Anything that's over, then, will flow into the taxable portion. So some can be, like this is fairly complex. So it really just depends. But just know that there is an FAQ. I think one of the videos I I did a while back that is on the YouTube channel was one of the FAQs. I have to go back and look, but I'm going to try to do more and post those. Um, so, um, but yeah, so glossary, I would say that's important. A lot of times we will get someone that a client will send us their file and they'll say, look, I have a reserve fund, lesser of. Why did DBC A pick 125% of average annual, debt service? Why was that the lesser of amount? I calculated as this, DBC is producing that. A lot of times, that comes in quite a bit. Or someone in our group will take care of it and say, here's the formula. And we'll sometimes direct you towards that. Say, here on my end on Excel, I used a formula, how it's calculated, and it matches. I would say about the only thing for search, NLF, which stands for Natural Language Format, which is kind of funny because we'd always kind of joke, if you're first using the program, how natural it is, I don't know. But I would look at, we have different, for example, we have examples, data fields, operations. But, you can see there's some that are very basic. Some can be, a little more advanced, like if then Boolean. So if you wanted to create an upfront expense, that would take the first 50 million at 1%. Anything greater than 50 would add 0.5% of the remaining amount. And if it happened to be less than 50 million, then it would just be that amount at 1%. This is what you would type in on the different lines. So these are just some examples we enter. So just wanted to kind of show you that quick help. Anywhere in the program, F1, you're good to go. Okay, so we'll get to the issuance cost. But again, you know that this is going to be part of a multi-purpose deal. Let's start creating some bonds. Click that. Let's say serial. I don't know, 30. Let's say 55. Oop. Short, long name. Short name up to 8 characters long. You can do stuff like underscore, but won't allow you to enter in like a dash. Short name is really more to link. It's a linking, type situation within the program. So you can reference if you want to calculate expenses off of specific bond components. If you want to allocate, let's say, earnings from one fund to another, the short name is how you kind of facilitate that. So click create. And that's why it's always important. We try to make it, start from the top down. So if you had skipped debt size assumptions because you're like, hey, I'm not going to put in the cost of issuance, I'm not going to put underwriter's discount, this is going to be part of a multi-purpose deal, let me just get to the bonds. The problem is if you skipped putting in dated delivery first interest payment and you just skip to creating the bond component, these will all be blank. And I can't tell you how many times early on client will just skip that. They will go into here and hard code. Remember, you hard code in anything, it stays that way till you unprotect it, right? Or you delete it. So what happens is they will type something here, and then down the road, they will enter in their dated delivery first interest payment, and this differs, and they'll go, I don't understand it. My deliveries, on July 1st, first interest is 1/1. Why are my bonds not based off of that? Well, if you go in here and you typed, if you type something like that, then it's going to start calculating interest, right, from August 1st. So anything hard coded on an individual bond component basis will override the general debt size assumption dates. And sometimes that's important. Sometimes someone may want to, uh, you know, that's more usually the variable rate table if they don't want to produce interest through a certain date. But the point is, again, hard code in anything that it's not going, the program's not going to somehow know, wow, you typed in August 1st, 25, but you did July 1st, that size assumptions, you must be wrong here. Well, how does it, you could be wrong in debt size assumption setup. So, got to know that. More times than not, you're going to create serial bonds, so you're not going to have to make any changes here. Again, what's most commonly created? Serial bonds. Obviously, if you make any kind of change, this is a cab. If this is a convertible cab, right, compounds interest until the final compounding date, and then produces simple interest or some kind of a note. Typically less than a year it matures. You'd make that change. So it wouldn't make sense if, say, the default's on a cab or on a convertible cab, pay until maturity date, and it's going to be priced to the actual maturity. So on a serial bonds, in most cases, unless you want to calculate off specific, like expenses off specific maturities, because in expenses you can only if you really want to calculate it on the most kind of most detailed level, is you can reference bond components, short names. You can't reference certain maturities within a bond component. So don't see that a lot. But if you knew some bonds are, let's say, insured, some maturities are not insured, well, you would just split out the serial bonds to here the insured in this bond component, here's the uninsured in this bond component, and then the expense, you could say, whatever, 0.1% of, total debt service of, and then the short name. And again, within the expense, you'd have one, we have examples for that. Also support. But just because you name it serial bonds, term bonds, that doesn't automatically mean that's how it's going to be calculated. So, and we'll get to the term bond in a moment. Price to the actual maturity. So, automatically, enter dates box appears. If you somehow hit cancel, you got to get out, and then later on you go back. Oh, it does do it. Okay, used to not. Or you come back and go, oh, I don't want to. Again, you can hit the F5, pulls up the menu, right mouse click, go back to enter dates, and you can say 7/1/26 and then 7/1/55. Annual, if it's anything other than annual, you'd make that change. Sometimes you may have semi-annual maturity dates. I don't typically see day alignment changed, but this does give you an option. So you could say, look, every July 1st, I want it to adjust to the first business day of July of every year. What is it? And it will then automatically, you don't have to try to figure out, okay, what's the first business day in July 1st of 2026 all the way to July 1st of 2055. NA just says, obviously not applicable, click OK. And that will, you can also copy paste from Excel if you have the dates. If you accidentally mess up and you go, oh, I need to make this semi-annual. Do I need to you could do, the right mouse click or F5, go back to enter dates, select semi-annual. You could also select copy down. If I said +6, meaning 6 months, you can even do plus. I don't know if you'd ever do this, but I'm just showing you. Let's say 7 days, for example. If you go back and go, no, I want to go back 12 months. Make sure it's on an annual, and that goes for when you start hard coding in rates, yields, price, right? So if you said, let's say it's 1%, and there is some kind of, most times probably not, but this is also kind of in accordance with the tutorials, just in case you don't know this. Copy down. You could say whatever copy operation I put in. If I did it for the first 5 cells down, and I did plus 0.01, let's say 5, something like that, right? That would do that. Or if I don't put a copy count, the important thing here, and again, we've hard coded, so that's letting you know. The important thing is when you start wanting to produce premium, discount, bonds, or you're trying to match someone's numbers. So this is what they show. Here's what I need to type in. The important thing is you do not type in rate, yield, price across the board for a particular maturity. So if you do this and you calculate, you will get a warning message, and it will tell you you've protected rate, yield, price for maturity. Make sure and verify the reports that the output is accurate. That's on you. So what we usually advise is to unprotect one of the 3 columns to allow the program to adjust, giving all your settings with the unprotected. It could be yield, it could be price, be rates, just to kind of let you know that, right? So if you messed up, didn't mean to do that, again, you could highlight, you could hit the delete key, right mouse click, 5, unprotect. Issuance to mom, by default, 5,000. If it's not rounded, you can put 0. If you put 1, it's in 1,000 denominations. Pretty much everywhere except itemized expenses, or if you need a specific draw from a cap I or a reserve fund, or a specific amount to be added or released, pretty much everywhere the numbers are going to be in thousands. I would say 95%. That's really more of a programming to keep it as robust and as fast as possible. Also, it's by design to where not only do we have the default settings, what's most commonly created or off of industry regs, there's a reason why you have to scroll. Now, this depends on how big of a monitor and so forth, but we try to put information that's not as commonly entered, not shown in the main screen. Now, obviously, if you do a lot of variable rate deals, you'd click advanced, you'd go to the variable rate table. For a while, years ago, when there was a lot of variable rate questions, that was about the only time I thought, oh, maybe it'd be a better idea to have a variable rate table tab, after the maturity structure tab. But the problem is there are a number of clients that it's not common, but we have some that for whatever reason, they just like to, I don't know, just hard code information. And we go, I said, okay, well, what did you think that was? Or I don't know. It's like, well, you can press F1 or just, hey, just ask because you did all this work for nothing. So advanced areas for the most part, unless it's say a variable rate, um, multi-mode, this is a lot of times, or when it is used, you may have interest payment dates that aren't, let's say in this case, semi-annual. You may have some that are um, off specific dates. And so you'll say, well, this is doing every January and July. What if I have an interest payment date that falls on something? Well, we would tell you, here's how you set up the multi-mode table. Assume call dates. The only time I ever see this used is if you're trying to match. Let's say you're like, hey, I don't understand. I'm trying to match these numbers. These, the numbers I'm trying to match, the call date, they're being priced at this call date, these particular maturities. Well, if the program's not doing it, it means it's not the lesser of the, price to call or price to maturity, and which is off of the regulations. But if you go, well, yeah, I guess they messed up, but I've got to match their numbers anyway. You can come in here and you can hard code in the pricing call date and pricing call price for either the pricing and or the R build. But again, even in here, the help, um, you know, these should not be used under the most normal circumstance because it may result in an improper price or R build if one is not careful. So again, it doesn't hurt you if you're not 100% sure what a particular area, what it will do if you hard code. It doesn't hurt to press F1. And also doesn't hurt just to send us your file through help email data to DBC just to make sure. This is hard. Every once in a while, you may have IDs that you want to hard code. Again, this is rare. And same thing, I would say about the only time is someone wants to amortize their principal, kind of like a loan. That would be the area. But for the most part, these are in advance for a reason. We didn't just, so don't think, wow, is this random why stuff's put kind of off the main screen and have to scroll over? Do I have to worry? Most times, no. VAR, I would say, if you ever have bifurcated maturities, and you enter in the bifurcated maturities in the same bond component, then the program will always or typically, if both these were 7126, well, and your objective is, and the program's objective is to, solve, if feasible, to whatever solution you're trying to solve at the lowest borrowing cost. Well, it wouldn't make sense, right, to then, bond for the more expensive bonds. So every once in a while in bifurcated maturities, someone will send us their file and say, hey, it's not producing, or it's giving me a warning or an error message, because the program may think you accidentally typed in 7/1/2026. How do I let the program know this is even the same bifurcated maturity? Well, you have to go to the VAR. You have to put some kind of a variable, a unique variable, to tell it that. But again, that's in the help. And if you don't do a ton of bifurcated maturities, it's may not even, kind of remember that. I know the original, they've been updated, but the original tutorials touched on hard coding in call date, call price. I would only use this if for some reason, let's say this is an actual series and you have, you've already created the bond component and it's lots of maturities and the call date / call price, there's lots of different ones, depending on what maturity. Um, and that's rare. The reason why I wouldn't do it here is because a lot of times, again, kind of like entering in specific dates on a bond component, that overrides, right? Call date, call price. Sometimes, you'll enter the call date, call price there early on, and then you'll enter it in where you'll end up seeing an icon. And this happens more in refundings. And they'll go, I don't understand. On my, I've linked it to the call table, the bond component. I'm calling bonds on 7/1/2035. Why are my bonds on the summary of bonds refunded reports showing them to be called at a different date? Well, that overrides. Or, why are they being priced, to, again, you could do 7/1/35, link it and go, are these going to be priced to the call date or priced to maturity, as well as priced for RBO purposes? And you'll look at the reports, bond pricing, and you'll go, I don't understand why it's showing it priced to this particular call date when that call date is different than the call table I entered. I immediately will go in here and I'll see information here entered. Well, a lot of times, depending on your computer or whatnot, it may be a larger font. You may not even see this column. You may have to scroll over. So unless you've got a bunch of different call date, call prices, and you've already created all the bond components, I would create it as a call table and link it, because again, it can be somewhat hidden. So save, and detail, term bonds. Each term bond needs to be in its own bond component, unlike serial bonds. And I'll show you. So term bond. So if you have a term bond, in this case, that matures in 2060 and one in 2065, can I create one term bond component and put, no, you have to create two different ones. So do 2060. So just because we named a term, with a short or long name, doesn't mean it's going to be priced or calculated as a term bond. How does that determine? So you could name this serial, accidentally, give it a wrong name. If you select, or by accident, it's supposed to be serial bonds, and you accidentally click this will say price to final maturity. So you remember our serial bonds, we typed in that example, all the maturities, each one of those maturities is being priced to that maturity. Whereas the term bond, right? So we could say 7/1/56, 7/1/60. This one term bond is going to price to the final maturity. Therefore, it's not going to be able to calculate, you've got an error. It doesn't make sense if the rate yield price is not the same all the way down. So this is the first sinking fund payment day. Starts so you hard coded the first sinking fund payment day is that first maturity. The final is that term bond's maturity date. So if I said, let's say it's I don't know, I'll just do 2.5, right? So if anything differs, rate, yield, price, something like that, and you try to calculate, it's not going to be able to, and it's going to give you an error message, because this is a term bond that's priced to the final maturity, right? So, and again, save or Control S, detail. If I do another term bond of 65, and I'll, especially if you weren't here a week ago, I will show you probably at the end. We call it Easy Agent. But again, that's really more for basic type structurings. Again, term bond. So you'll just go through here, right? And then first sinking fund payment date. When does this one-term bond mature? Whatever the rate, yield, price. Now, this, you may have a variable rate on it. You can, if it's, starting this date, that rate changes, that's fine. You would enter that in here and it will change. But the hard coding of the information is, just remember, each term bond goes in its own bond component, right? And because it's that one term bond, this is not 5 term bonds where they're each priced. And if you forget and you accidentally click serial bond, this will be treated as a serial bond, serial bond, serial bond, and it's each one's going to be priced to that maturity. So save, knowing if you did issuance costs, stuff like that. Well, let's do this just for the example, right? So you already know, well, project funds, this is part of a multi-purpose deal. Could you create it here? Sure. So let's just say project fund. Why did I call it? Hold on one second. That didn't make sense. Let me edit. So this is good. If you make a mistake, you need to edit something, short, long name, click on open up. Now there's different ways to view, and it's going to really be determined on how you like to view it. There's a detail list where it really breaks it down, where you can sort by short name, by timestamp, group by type, different options, and also filter, where you say, look, I just want to view the proposed series. I don't want to view all the other. So you have different options here, different ways to view, and I've seen them all different types where you have to actually select and it will give you the info. I would say, this is kind of the original, but there are a number where you'll send us your file, I'll open it up and I'll see something like this. So it really just depends on how you like to. Obviously, this is not a 2000. It's fine, but that's not really descriptive, right? 2020, it's not. So I can edit, or you can right mouse click and go edit, and I'll go, and I'll say 2025. How about 250 million new money series? Or you may not want to put the 200. It could be. It depends on, how descriptive. 200, about 250 million. Okay. Now you'll see it update. All right. Project fund. Let's say I don't know what the project draws are going to be. Obviously, you can enter those in. I know what, remember I was saying, when you enter in numbers in thousands, most places, right? So 250 million. Now, if I go back here and I did, if I did have, let's say starting 8/1/25 through 12/1/25, or how about 6/1/26, and it's on a monthly, you do know what the draws, you'd hard code those in, and you probably wouldn't hard code in 250, you'd keep it on calculated. If you go, I know it's 250 million, I don't know what the draw requirements, they're equal weight, equally weighted. I activate that. Now the program is going to be able to determine the draw requirements, given the investment amount, given the rate. Again, if you hard code in and we'll get to the first interest date and the maturity date. But let's just say something like this. So you know this, save, and you go through and you go, okay, let me do expenses. Let me do issuance expense. So again, remember how we talked about in debt size assumptions, very limited in many ways. A lot of times it's not going to fit under dollar per $1,000 of the par or percentage or a fixed, even if it does, right? And you can't see it. You don't, that's information like, right now, oh, I've entered information here, here, and here. I've entered information here. You don't know here. The only time an icon would appear, I could say, 6, 25, 25, advanced training, quarter, let's say, quarter 2, right? Well, and this may help you a lot of times, especially if you're working on, maybe you've made a lot of copies of series and maybe you've adjusted the yields and you're like, well, it used to be you had to kind of create an itemized expense and do a dollar sign and then type out, here's a note section. So obviously I named mine 2025 Q2 training, but if that wasn't the case in myself, a year or two from now, I'm going, what is this? Well, I could go in here, like if I gave it a generic, and I'd go, was this a client? Or is this something I come in, I'll go, oh, that's okay. That's the 625 advanced training. Oh, okay. Yeah. Whether I need it or I don't need it, So, but as you can see here, you don't know about issuance expense. You'd have to actually, calculate it. And again, you could create issuance expense on a project finance level and on an individual series level, and it will double count or it counts both. So you go, I don't understand. I type, here's my issuance expenses on the project finance level. Well, for example, you typed in 250,000 for the cost of issuance. Well, why am I getting a different aggregated amount? Well, probably you'd go into one of these series and you'd go in here and you would see something hard coded. As you can imagine, what if you've got 10 different series that are part of a multi-purpose deal? Then you got to start searching each one. So, expense section. This is default itemized expenses. It may not fall under a cost of issuance or an underwriter's discount. But if this is, in this case, an issuance expense, and I'll call it, this will give us kind of a look of, and it used to only be available in the project finance module where you could create a quote type issuance. So you'll see the different look here where there's just a generic, let's say EQ, let's say equity. Default. See how you see it's very different looking. Not only the tabs are different, but you'll see the icons look different. This allows you could do a cost of issuance. You could be part of cost of issuance. You could size. Sometimes this happens. Actually, why don't I do this? Yeah. How about edit? I will do AP. This. Sometimes we'll get this. Client will say, hey, I have a cost of issuance. I want to size to any kind of excess proceeds. If I have any kind of excess proceeds, well, you couldn't create that in the issuance expense here. It would be done on a separate, especially because you may not have rounding is kind of done on a per series basis. But regardless, cost, underwriter's discount, average takedown. If this is just cost of issuance, I would say if you press the space bar or you click, you're given some info. But again, natural language format, NLF. Just because we give you a few, that doesn't mean you're limited. There's no way we could give you every possible formula. I mean, it'd be page after page after page. I would say, if you are in this training today and you haven't used if you haven't used the program long, hard coding in formulas, personally, what I've seen, even if it's available, even if you go, oh, it's a percentage of par, right? I would type that in, just because the more you enter in this NLF, natural language format, I have found it that you end up being able to start going, well, I want to do this on remaining bond balance or bond value. And you start to learn how to type that information in. But in this case, if I said it was 250,000, I'd type that in. So this is still kind of treated like an itemized expense. One of the few places, because Ted really, cap I draw sections. Every once in a while, a client will say, I need to draw out X amount on my cap I instead of 100% of the interest or a percentage. That's when we would tell them, oh, in the draw section, type in the date, space, and then type out the amount to the penny. That's not very common. What I will say is, if you create itemized expenses, whether it's the default expense or issuance expense, you do need to type it out to the penny. That's about the only time you'll type out something to the penny. And you'll know this when you calculate and you go, wait a minute, why are my expenses, why does it show $250 instead of 250,000? Well, you probably forgot and you typed in 250. Underwriter's discount, you could say, let's say it's 5 per bond. And that's that whole dollar per $1,000 par amount. You could also type that out as a formula where you can, but just to kind of show you, let's say it's, 2 per bond, 2 per bond, 1 per bond. You could say 0.1% of total, of par. You have many different options here. And again, you don't see anything that says per bond, right? So that just that goes to show you, I wouldn't get super comfortable unless you're doing very basic type structurings. More times than not, you're going to have to kind of, like you don't see bond value, outstanding par, but anyway, so, and you can create as many different issuance, many different expense as need be. And the reason I created it here, I know I said we're going to do it all on the project finance level, is to kind of show you how easy it is, even if you do, because a lot of times you're going to create or have these individual series and you're not going to know it's going to be part of a multi-purpose deal. I would say you're pretty much, you won't have to create from scratch if you at least create your expenses in as an icon, because you can copy, you can paste. I'll show you component gallery where you can save this and retrieve it no matter what data file, what issuer, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to retrieve it. So going down, reporting options, if I have additional titles, if you want to align the dates, footnotes, I could say, oh, all reports. But again, a lot of this you can do on the project finance level. Alternate text, if you don't like in a particular CAN DBC report how it's worded, and it has nothing to do with, let's say, has nothing to do with, the short or long names that you've entered in, You can, the thing is, you would type in the original text on whatever report and then replace it with whatever you want. The important thing is original text needs to be hard coded exactly how it shows. So if it's all in caps, you got to type all in caps. If not, a lot of times it's not going to recognize it. It can be a little finicky. At the end, I do. And again, we're going to really solve this on the project finance level. So even if you go in here and you make a bunch of changes and you put revenue, stuff like that, well, depending on if you're trying to wrap around, you're trying to solve it on the project finance level, all this information you typed in, it's pretty much kind of wasted work. So let me just save this for now. Click open, and we'll go back to the advance. So we've created the 2025 new money, right? And so we have the new money portion. Now we need to create the refund case, right? So in advance, same issuer, click new. I'm going to call it 2025 refund level savings. Just, you notice by clicking the refund case, see, you'll see the different icon. Now, when you create a refund case, it will also create, again, we kind of went over this a week ago, creates a shell, right? That's linked to the, because everything you calculate, if it's pulled into the project finance, will calculate on the project finance level. But if you were just calculating a refund, the escrow information is only entered or linked on the refund case level, right? So in the refund case, this is where, and again, click on advanced, you'll see here's the proposed refunding that's attached. So you may have 50 different refund cases. You want to know which proposed refunding is attached to which refund. So automatically, it used to be you had to create a proposed refunding series and then link it after you created the refund case. It just created a lot more work. And then we started having clients saying, what if I have 50 different refund cases? Because it used to be you had to have a different short name linked to the refund case. So on this level, you didn't know which proposed refunding was linked to which refund case. So to eliminate unnecessary steps when you create a refund case, so don't create the proposed refunding series for just create the refund case. You'll get proposed refunding series. So if I click on it, so this is going to be obviously the new information, right? But what about the bonds we want to refund? Let me go back. I'd already created one from last week. So for example, 2018, you would put in your original dated delivery first interest. You may have cabs, so it does need to accrete from the original, depending dated to delivery. You would come in here, you would hard code in what are the rate, yield, price, what, I obviously leave one out of the three. You would hard code in your issue amounts, your rates. This is actual series. This is information you'll have that you can hard code, right? And then you would create the call table, in this case, 7128. So this is an 18. But just because you create a call table doesn't mean it's linked, because you can create multiple call tables. When you create your call tables, you put in the information, provisions, click setup. This is where you can link. 30 days notice. On the OS, a lot of times it'll say if there's a certain number of days notice. A lot of times what happens is you'll type in a call table that may fall on or prior to the delivery date of the refunding series, proposed refunding series. So then those bonds automatically get called on delivery, and you'll wonder why you didn't purchase any slugs. It's all cash. Well, slugs need 30 days from purchase to maturity for you to purchase, or yes, interest bearing slugs. So if it does say 30 days notice, that's great. In this case, the first call date is way past 30 days from the delivery. Um, so, but just to kind of show you, let's just create one. So we have a 2018 refunded series. Again, I'll select, click new series. Let's say it's 2020. Right? 2020. It's no big deal if you forget. If you keep it on proposed, it doesn't calculate it any differently. It only matters when in the refund case, when we create or the prior icon, and then we start to select bonds to be refunded, only series that show actual refunding, you don't have to worry about the actual refunding, but basically actual status will appear. This cuts down confusion. But then if you go, wait a minute, I created the 18 in 2020, when I try to refund them and they don't show up, we'll just say, you got to click on open. You'll need to select, click edit, and make sure, you would go here, either right mouse click F5, hit edit, you would change the status. And then when you go back to the refund case, then you'll see, oh, now I'm able to select these bonds to be refunded. So this is just, again, I'm going to kind of go through the same theme. 2020, you type in all this information, 21. So, okay. How far do these go out? Let's see. Let me just make sure. 1855. Okay. So 15. Okay. 55. So let's say going back to 2020. Actually, let me just do that. Okay. Refunding series. Proposed. I'm just going to get out so it doesn't confuse. Click that. And we have the refund case, the proposed refunding series, which we haven't really. Now we're back to the actual series. Okay. So enter that information. Let me add some serial bonds. Let's say serial. I don't know. Let's see. What is it? 20. I don't know. 48. Everything. No changes needed. And then we could do 7/1, 21, 7/1, 48. And again, you'll know what these rates are. Let's say it starts at 3. And you may have these rates, and I'll show you how to do that when we get to the project finance. MMD yields, you may have, if you have them in Excel, you can copy paste if you want, plus point. It should probably be higher than that, but you're going to type in, obviously this is existing debt, so you know what these refunded bond maturities are. I'm just going to put, doesn't really, let's see, say 250,000 all the way down, 7 million. Or we could do that. Copy down, but you can also do Control C, Control V. Or it could be even more, million. And it can be different amounts. The point is you'll have this information. OS, or you'll have it, and then you'll just hard code in all that information. So 48, let's see, 55. Let's see, let's do a term bond. Let's see, 48. Let's say 53. Term bond. 48. So click term bond. 49. And again, these obviously are going to be different amounts. You'll just type that in. Let's say it's for, so this is one term bond, 4.45, right? So 53, and then we'll do another one, term, let's say term. Let's say term. Let's do 2000. Three. Oop. There's different ways. Oop, that's a count. There's different ways to enter in dates. You could do space. I think even dash. So there's different ways of entering in dates. Let's just say it's the point is you're going to have bonds that you want to refund. You're going to set all that up. In this case, let's have it go 10 years out, 2030 at par. Obviously, if it's starting 2030 at and then 31, it's at 100.5. You enter in all that information, but it doesn't matter if that's deleted and stuff. So if it is just 10 years out of par, and then remember, you have to make sure, just because you may have different call, the terms might have a different call provision. You create another call table, set that up. Just because you create the call table doesn't mean now they're linked, right? You have to go to the setup, and then, so you may have non-callables. So certain bonds may be in a different bond component, and you won't select anything or select NA, so, and you can copy paste, or you can just select the down arrow. Any dates, if they're forced, and OS says no, they have to be called on an interest payment day, and your call date doesn't fall on an interest payment day. This case, this one it does, you would select interest payment day. And again, the number of days notice. This will ensure if you have 30, most cases, you will purchase slugs. In this case, though, they're being called in 2030. So that's proposed refunding series is going to be kind of the same thing, July 1st of 25. Save. Get out of that. Now we're back in this refund case. So, so what are we going to do here? In the proposed refunding, I'm going to, where I put in the, no, we didn't. Okay. 7-1, kind of stick with the same theme here. And again, just like that new money, don't need to put in information here, right? Because we'd have to just delete it if we want to calculate issuance expense, which is fairly common on this type of structuring on an aggregate basis and allocated across. So in this case, I'm just going to have serial. Let's just say serial bonds through 57, let's say. Seven, 1, 26, and then 7, 1, 57. Times. And again, probably not going to have any kind of a pattern. You're going to have to hard code, or if you have MMD, and I'll show you how to do that, link it to that, and or copy paste, right? Oops. No, it should be higher than that. But, and again, do I create it? What if there is a reserve fund? What if, expenses? Yes, you can do it here as well. But again, most likely you're going to have to remove it. And in this case, we just want to create the new structuring, the proposed refunding. We're hopefully going to get level savings, right? And, our new debt hopefully will be X amount per year versus the prior amount. So back in the refund case, I would say you're going to want to go to Security Universe. I don't know in your firm if you're allowed to save slugs open market. You can select here. I could say desktop. Right. You could create a folder and have it, depending on the firm you work for. Sometimes I have to link it to some kind of a shared drive. That's fine. This will dictate where you're able to download, where it's going to save. Because if you click on SECS and click slug files and you can do current, you can do historic, and you type that in. I would say the big thing, and it's going to tell you it's been installed. Same thing with open markets. Now with open markets, a lot of times, a lot of firms, somebody has access to download and you link it. If you're able to make the downloads for open markets and you don't have your login name and password, you can always just email us, even your files. Hey, nothing to do with this file. I need OMS login and be able to, so I can download. I would say in a refund case, when you go to refund assumptions, by default slugs, you have different options. That's the most common. I would say what's important is current doesn't mean today's slug file. It means the most recent slug file you have either downloaded or wherever you have your path linked to the downloaded slugs, that will show the most current. And that can mean current could be the 25th of June. If I had not just downloaded, it would still say current. I would click on the down arrow and the first slug would show 18 of June. So basically when you download, it basically downloads it twice. One as a current.slg file and 25 June 25.slg file. So tomorrow I go back and I click on SECS, download slugs. That current.slug file will get replaced, which will reflect 26 June 25.slug file. So the big thing is current doesn't mean automatically, oh, it's today's file. If you're responsible for downloaded slugs on your computer and you have it linked, let's say to, you have a folder, And today, the last time you downloaded slugs was last week. Well, now you can see this in some of the escrow reports. It'll tell you which slug file you're using. Don't just automatically, though, think current. And sometimes we'll have this. Sometimes you'll keep it on current, and then down the road, you go, oh, I need to reprint some reports out. And it's already a done deal. And if it's on current, but let's say 6 months from now, you need to print out these reports for some reason. And you go in here and you calculate, and it's kept on current. Obviously, your escrow is going to change. All your numbers are going to change. So we get it every once in a while, but usually the alarm bells that ring off in my head when it's, hey, I went back to print out reports and I'm getting much different results than the original. What's going on? I'm freaking out. I usually go, you have it on current, you're using 25 June 25 slug rate file. Your last numbers were based off of, let's say, 25th of May 25. So obviously your slug rates differ, your escrow cost differs, the bonds differ to cover, everything changes. So what do? I would say there's good and bad about this. If you select the specific slug rate file, that just remember, if you download tomorrow, the next day, next week, don't automatically think the newest slug rate is being used, because again, you select that specific slug rate file regardless of future slug rates. Because it's not on current, it's still going to it's still locked into that. So that's a good thing, as long as I'm locked in on this slug rate file until I change it. And as long as you know that, that's great. Or you can keep it on current as long as down the road, if you're trying to print out, numbers based off of some run, based off of a slug rate file, make sure know which slug rate file that you used, which specific one, because if it's current, obviously that gets updated. The current slug file gets updated whenever you download a newer slug rate file. Okay? Global proceeds escrow, that's fine for now. Actually, we're not going to use global proceeds because this isn't project finance. We're going to have some monies that are going to be allocated. And I'm going to show you how to set that up. So global proceeds just means, fill 100% with bond proceeds. But we'll get to that in a second. Just wanted to say about the current, just so you know that. So that's just the assumptions. Automatically put in the at least the bonds, proposed refunding. How do we import in the bonds we want to refund? Click detail, short and long name, click create. Select bonds. I can click on the ... This is where status equals actual. That's why this appears. Again, if the status was by default proposed, you wouldn't see this. You'd have to get out of here, click on open, right mouse click or select it, click edit, put it back on status actual, come back in here and you'll see it appear. Now, you can come in here and you can say, I don't want to refund 2.1 million. I want in this year to, refund 1 million of it. You can start hard coding in certain amounts. You can deselect certain bonds if you don't want it included, right? Sometimes though, there's an easier way to do this. I'm going to shade in both, right? Just to kind of show you different ways. So sometimes we'll get, hey, I only want to refund 85%. whether it's just certain series, certain maturities. Do I have to go in here and try to figure out 85? Well, no. I would say, you shade in the bonds you want to refund. Then you can go into input bond, click on the dot, dot, dot blank. You'll click import and it'll tell you, do you want to override settings, the information? Click yes. Now you'll see amount to refund equals the issue amount. These are all, see the series. And you can select certain cells. Now, obviously, you can't do something like that cell and then one below it. It's kind of, you'd have to do it. But if it's across the board or only the 2018 series, for example, you can just select those. But if you right mouse click, go modify, and you times 0.85, you'll see now 85% of 157,500,000, 133,875,000. So you do something like that. Now, the important thing is, I've noticed, is sometimes I'll see this if in a multi-purpose deal, you've got, say, refund A and refund B, and you're trying to issue a percentage of the 2018s and 85% and refund A, and then you have a separate refund case where you're trying to refund the remaining, the 15%, let's say in this case. Well, the important thing is across the board. So if you have a separate refunding and it's going to be, or it's in a different prior debt icon, you have different escrows. The important thing is the amount to refund, total amount, cannot exceed the issue amount. And so, if you're working with a bunch of different escrows or a bunch of different refund cases, and each one is trying to refund off of same actual series, even if it's off a penny, even if it's trying to refund a penny more, you will get an error message, and it will tell you, hey, serial, the 2018 serial 48, 2019 maturity is basically over refunded. Even if you hard code in, if you did 2100.0001, and it will give you that. So basically, you cannot make sense, right? If the total amount to refund is, 2.1 million, you can't ever refund more than that. So, yeah, that's how you can kind of do percentages. Again, you select the bonds, then shade in, select bonds, then you go to input bonds, you click import, and then you do the amount to refunds, whatever the bonds, or you may have Excel spreadsheet that you want to override, right? It may be easier to go, oh, I've already did the 2.1, 85% is this. I don't want to do the select and then do modify times it by 0.85. Can I just copy paste? Yep. Just paste it in there and you click OK. Now, if I go back to select bond, I'm going to just do the full amounts. Now, you do not have to deselect bonds that have already matured, already retired. Obviously, this new series, this proposed refunding, the project finance has, the new date of delivery, right, is July 1st, 2000. So anything that falls on or prior, especially prior, these aren't going to be included, right? And you will get a warning message just saying basically, hey, you have bonds that have already matured that fall on or prior to the new delivery date, just letting you know. That's probably one of the few warning messages I don't particularly care for, only because, I don't know if there's a benefit. A, I already know that. B, okay, I didn't expect them to be included because they've already retired, right? They've already expired. So Funds on hand, unless, like if you have a BAB subsidy, and that's an FAQ, we can also help you with it. There's a couple different ways. Ongoing expenses. If you do have an ongoing expense from a refunded series, you can enter that in the refunded, the actual series, and have it applied. When you click it, go in the PRI icon, advanced. This is where you can apply prior ongoing expenses. But like prior reserve funds, any kind of prior funds, if this is a partial refunding and you do have a prior ongoing expense, and the problem is that prior ongoing expense may calculate based off of all the bonds in that actual series. Well, what if you're not refunding 100%? So you want to do just whatever the refunded bonds are. You would need to set that up in the proposed refunding as an other formula, or like in case of set asides, equity contribution, any kind of prior fund, from the 2018, 2020. Basically, there's no need. I mean, you can, but in an actual series, if you set up a debt service reserve fund, there's not a way for it to automatically transfer. Now, sometimes clients in the past asked why. Well, again, what if it's a partial refunding? It doesn't make sense to have an option where a prior reserve fund can 100%, basically be transferred over when you're doing a partial refunding, So if it's a prior reserve or prior fund, right? So I can say a 2020 debt service fund, for example, and I could say it's 100,000, and I want to apply it. And we also see this for set asides and interest and stuff like that. But if we want to apply some kind of an amount, whether it's a transference amount, if it's an equity contribution, if we want to spend it or apply and spend it a certain way in the escrow, how do we do that? Well, we type out whatever the fund description, the amount, spend remaining in escrow name. Let's just say I called it 2020. Click on the escrow, same short name. How do we want to spend it? I'll say select first. Now, you may go, how do I know? How do I know? Remember, F1. So select how the escrow is to be invested with regards to order which requirements are to be funded. Typically, with debt service reserve funds, this is in a prior series, are proportional, ratable, strict. Options common to debt service fund investments or select first accelerated. And then it gives you more explanation. Select first. Solution requires same securities to be used for all escrows. Total requirements are funded by one escrow, one cost, and it's carved up to individual escrows, each consisting of a portion of the securities purchased. Select first purchases are allocated to fund the earliest requirements of the escrow. Cost is equal to the amount of the funds on hand amount. So again, you have these different options. You select the appropriate option. And then the BP is the filled with remaining with bond proceeds. So that's kind of just a basic. If it's not yield restricted, you would select NA. The big thing is anything entered in this tab, even if it's just an escrow name and you didn't do any funds on hand, you decide to go in here and just give it an escrow name. Hard coding anything in here will override anything entered here. So if your yield limit, you did NA, right? It's not limited to anything. And you went in here and just decided to just type in BP, right? And then got out. Well, your escrow is going to be limited to the ARB yield. And you'll get a warning message. It'll say, hey, basically you entered something in this escrows tab in the prior icon. That general, global proceeds escrow, you may as well just uncheck it, right? Because anything, if you did additional cash, stuff like that. Savings assumptions, again, anything that a lot of times, that's the thing, and I kind of went over this, and I will today, a week ago. Your savings output, if you do everything right and it's feasible, you're going to look at the savings, you go, great. If your objective is level savings, level net saving, oh, perfect. Everything's done. But if it's not even feasible, or if you don't select everything right, it's not going to really tell you. It's just going to show you, here's a difference between, prior debt service and the refunding debt service. You may have ongoing fund, earn, all that kind of stuff. Here's the output. Well, if it's not level, it's not level. It doesn't really tell you anything. It's the solution report that will determine or give you a lot more information. You view the bond solution report and you go, oh, the revenue constraints, the prior debt. Oh, wow, it's so extreme in certain years, it's impossible to get, say, level savings. Like some certain years, I'm trying to refund 20 million, in certain years, it's 100,000. Well, how do I get level? It'll give you a lot more info. You can finagle, you can modify the savings report. It can be, you can add or subtract out cash flow adjustments to the prior or the refunding, whereas that's not really the case in the actual solution. But we'll get to that. Portfolio, more times than not, the only time is if you need to hard code in portfolio to match someone's portfolio. You could do that and then link it to the escrow. And then kind of the same thing, footnotes, alternate text. We'll get to that. Now you can go in here and go uniform bond solution. By default, it's going to use prior debt. So whatever the structure is of the refunded debt, hopefully the new debt will produce level savings. But again, just because you select something here doesn't mean when you create the project finance that, depending on how you want to solve it, it's not going to automatically do uniform, and I'll show you that. So save. So that's the refund. So now advanced. Now we've got the refund, proposed refunding that's attached. We've got a couple of refunded bond series, and then we have the new money. So now select, go new. Now we're going to do the financing. We can do about money 25. We could just do new money refunding. Let's do that. About 250. New money wrap around refunding aggregate level debt service. I know it's very long. So I don't usually do something that long, but automatically goes, you'll see this by the little bridge icon. Again, you can see it here as well, little bridge icon. Um, I will say if occasionally a client will say, look, I've got a ton of different actual series. I would like to pull them into a project finance. How do I do that? Because when I click on add, all I see is status proposed and actual refund case. Well, you can always go in project finance assumptions, and this gives you the overall data. You can override, but here's the default settings. Um, and this may change. You may have more than one refund. And you may say, I wanted the RBO of each refunding series. But those are options that you can choose. Other options, you can allow computation of actual series. You can activate that, and that will allow you to pull in actual series. But in this case, we're not doing that. We're pulling in, and you can either select both, right or right mouse click, go select all. So again, going into the new money, that's all the new money information we've entered in. And then the refund case. So this is all information we've entered in. We've just imported. Master series allocation is no longer used. The reason it is shown is because way back when, before universal bond solutions and universal components, especially universal components were added, this was a way to create certain funds, expenses on certain level, then allocated a certain. It was not very user friendly. So, but we can't get rid of it because there are a number of deals that we don't ever want a client to all of a sudden send us their file and say, "Hey, 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, you know, all of my project finance, what's the deal? Where's the master series allocation? It's all deleted. So can't, and that's good for you because who knows 10 years from now or 5 years from now what kind of additions. You don't want to ever feel like, wow, with any kind of upgrade, stuff's getting removed. And then what? Now I got to try to figure out and re-enter all that information. No. So I would say in your case, not going to use master series, universal bond solution. So remember, our objective is what? First, solve level savings. So, and then we want to wrap the new money around the refunding. How do we do that? So we'll click on add. I'm just going to give it, keep it UBS. I'm only going to select, well, I'll show you. If I selected both, if you select both, what you're saying is, I want to produce combined level debt service, but I'm not structuring the refund in any way. There's no saving structure, right? Because doing it this way, you're selecting both series and you're saying combined, my objective and only objective is to produce aggregate level debt service. And you go, wait a minute, I need though the refund to produce level savings. Well, then we need to remove the refund out. Okay. And then you go, well, how do I add it? Well, we've got additional debt service for wrapping. We'll select that refund. So what this is doing is it's going to solve whatever here, uniform. And then what we're doing is I'm going to do size globally. Size globally will, produce aggregate rounding less than a bond. Again, feasible. That's the sizing target. So, and we'll get this a lot of times. We'll have clients that go, hey, I've got contingency group, entered in. If you don't have a universal bond solution and you want to share and produce aggregate rounding to be less than a bond, put it in the same contingency group. But once you put once you create a universal bond solution, whatever series is listed under the series selection, then it's not going to use this contingency group. So how do you then put them in the same contingency group? Sizing target, size globally. And what we're doing is saying we're going to produce, hopefully, level savings, and then we're going to wrap the new money around this level savings output in hopes of producing aggregate level debt service. By the way, it's kind of like level gross debt service, right? And we'll get into that, right? And I'll show you what you have to, select and stuff like that. What are the revenue? It doesn't matter. So basically, that's all you would do for this. Now, but again, what did we say? Wait a minute, issuance cost. Let's say you do have reserve fund, cap I. How do we do all that? So, okay, well, again, if you had a bunch of these in each one, you create a cost of issuance underwriter's discount, you got to basically delete and start from scratch. But if you created icons, you can copy or cut, say cut, go back to the project finance and right mouse click and go paste. Do you wish to paste the universal component? Yes. By default, or if you created it, by default, it's going to be calculated in aggregate and then allocated pro rata across all series. But you may say, no, I want, this 5 per bond, I want it to be based off of one allocated to the other. So if you said, the per bond, the 250 or the formulas, 5 per bond, 2 per bond, 1 per, 0.1% of par amount, that's only going to be based off of the refund. But I want it allocated to the new money series. So as you can imagine, it's very flexible, right? But in this case, cost of issuance, underwriter's discount. Now, anytime you see an icon, we have something called a component gallery. If you've noticed, when you've used the program, whenever you've gone somewhere, you'll see this component gallery, whether it's funds. I would say what you can do is any kind of an icon you can save, and then you can paste it into your component gallery, and you can retrieve it in any other data file, already created. It's going to be created. It doesn't matter. And this, I've kind of seems like it's been most helpful to clients who have told me, look, almost every deal I've got to create all these different expenses, and do I have to start from scratch? Well, no. I mean, obviously the formulas you're going to have to change probably, but in terms of typing it out and having it a certain way, and you can save anything as an icon, you can retrieve it. So, for example, again, copy, tools, and it doesn't matter which series you're in, doesn't matter. You can go to component gallery. The first time you create one, you'll see something like this. If you've already created it, you can select. See, that was already there. Let me just delete. Right mouse click, go paste. Oh, there we go. There's the debt component. So basically, anything you want to save, right? If I go file, close, sure, yeah. So when you click add, you'll see it. Again, double click, it tells you the component type, create. Now, again, it's not going to be these formulas every time, but you can imagine if you're, you've got 20 different underwriters discounts, and this goes for itemized expenses. Basically, you don't have to do a start from scratch. And again, you can go in here, expense, you'll see it. Obviously, we don't want to double count, but I'm just kind of showing you. Let me just cut that. And then, yeah. And let's just to show you paste. So rounding amount, that's done on an individual basis, series basis. So what we would do is embed. And that way, if there's any, rounding amount and we want to have it funded into cost of issuance, it will, and I'll show you. But we could go through here. So if you know this, you can now, even if it's existing. So for example, the basic class, and it can be in a different database. If I go to if I click on data file and I select a prior database, I can go to any database, doesn't matter. It will show up in the component gallery. Why is that? Well, tools, preferences. Once you create, you can scroll down, you will see file for component gallery. Obviously, if you save your component gallery on a shared drive, there's good and bad about that, right? Because sometimes colleagues want to share. Hey, we all want it to look like this. Hey, I created issuance. I created marketing or, bond counsel fees, all these different kinds of fees. Here's where I saved it. Let's share it. Well, obviously, if somebody goes in there and, makes changes and overrides it or deletes it from the component gallery, well, now you've already have it in some of your files, so you can always, re-enter, copy and paste back into the component gallery. But just kind of know that. Capitalized interest fund. And again, there are standards. You can click on it and you can say reserve. You click OK, and it can run you through that. I would say I would get used to, if you're new-ish, just hard coding it in. Typically, your cap I, and we'll get this a lot, that whole general fund. Why is there a general fund column in the net debt service? Well, a lot of times you will try to calculate interest accrued through a certain date on an aggregate basis, and then it's allocated pro rata. Well, obviously, when the allocated cap I amounts, it's not meeting 100% of each individual series. So a lot of times we say you got to do embed. It's net funded GIC, right? And then requirements. We'll say, let's see, bond interest accrued through. Let's see. So let's see. What was the next one? 7/1. How about 6/1/26? Accrued through, again, F1. We even provide. So again, anywhere, and you're just like, I don't know exactly what to type in. We even give you examples of reserve in cap I. Accrued is important word, text. That will assure you that it will bond or accrue interest through that date. So in this case, if I just said bond interest through 6/1/26, it's actually going to calculate bond interest through 7/1/26. That's just how it's, accrued will always accrued through that date, regardless if that date falls on an interest payment date or not. Okay, now the thing is though, we did the cap I, but remember we had this new money project fund and we have interest, right? Well, we can leave it here if we want. I would say, I would, I don't know if you want to create as in a component gallery, just because it's not that hard to create project funds. Plus, a lot of times they can be vastly different. So if I go paste, let's say I rename it. New money project, new money, 50 million project fund. Now, obviously, this is not calculating, and it's even if I do embed, that means it's going to create two project funds: a 250 million for the new money and a 250 million for the refund. Let me just make sure and set it to the new money. I will have interest, and let's say I want it to go to another fund. I'll have it go maybe to the cap I. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stay in there because it's a project fund. I'll do that with the reserve fund. So the reserve fund, that will be calculated in aggregate, then allocated. But again, this happens a lot, and it's an FAQ, and I think I even did a video, I believe so, on the YouTube website. And this happens a lot. It's you create this, and you go either you leave it like this, or you select debt service, calculate, view the net debt service report, and you go, what's this general fund? How do I get rid of it? Well, remember, we are taking care of 100% of bond interest through 6/1/26, right? If you have interest earnings through that period, which we do on the reserve fund, where does it get out? It can't get allocated to debt service for that period because Cap I takes care of 100% of it, right? So what do? Well, the program goes, well, got to create a general fund. We'll put that interest earnings in the general fund until the Cap I is done, and then we'll have it apply towards debt service. So most cases will tell you, no, you got to go in here and select, does it get applied to the project fund? Does it get applied to Cap I? You'd select, you don't need to do a start and end date unless you want the interest earnings to stop prior to the, final draw date of the Cap I. Most times you don't need to enter that in. And then debt service. Same thing if you hard code, this happens a lot, first interest. So you'll go in here and you'll go, oh, well, the final date is, you'll hard code in, like, oh, in 2057, I'm going to go ahead and hard code. But remember, you hard code a date, it will release the debt service reserve fund on that maturity date, regardless if that's the final date of the series. So what happens is early on, you go in here and you type in 7/1/57 or whatever, and then the maturity dates change, and then you're running it and going, why is this getting released early? Why is it getting released late? If you leave it blank, then it will adjust accordingly. Because again, if you hard code in the date, even if it makes 0 sense, the program has no way of knowing that's a mistake or that's not what you meant. You typed in this because originally your maturity date fell on the same date, but now you changed the final maturity date to a different. No, it doesn't know that. So how are we going to calculate? And again, if you go in here, So we have these options. But again, it's not limited to this. So it could be a date followed by an amount. You know, I would get used to doing the 10% of par. So it's going to take the lesser of whatever the amount is on line 2, 3, and 4. That's what gets deposited. Interest earnings is going to flow first to the cap I, through the cap I period, and then it's going to draw down debt service afterwards. Again, save. Universal escrow, it's not typically if you have more than one refund and you want just one escrow, that's you would kind of set that up. That's just not it's not used very often. Also, it won't allocate specific securities to the different refund because it's considered an aggregate on a project finance level. So then reporting options, if I just said, um, or if I wanted to, and or if all the footnotes, I could, say, foot alternate text, and I'll show you the original text and replacement text in a moment because there's kind of a trick if it falls on different, say, column, like a column title, and it falls on two different rows. How do you deal with that? So we're hoping here that we can produce not only level savings, but an aggregate. Now, if you say, yeah, but I want to include, I want to include, I want to be at level, like a level net. Actually, let's just run this now. And actually, you know what? I'll go back in here. Let's see. Adjust debt service. This is just like when we got our debt size or refunding. Let's see if that works. So we can calculate. See, one or more refunded bonds mature on or before. Global proceeds not used, right? Because we created in that expense. That's fine. Rent. Now start selecting reports. Breakdown is where they're broken out to two separate columns. Do financing results here, summary of bonds. So there's savings. Let's do that. And let's do that. Escrow requirements. Right. Let's see. I want to at least get some. Oh, here's net debt service. Obviously, any kind of report that has a parentheses next to it, you can modify it. I would always be cautious of modifying to annual, especially when trying to verify numbers, because obviously, and that even goes for the savings. Because, like, for example, PV savings, each cash flow is present valued back. So, if you just modify it to annual, that doesn't really give you an accurate view of the PV savings, just because if you're trying to verify, you need to go back to the continuous and present value back each cash flow, and then they're combined on an annual basis, right? So, but I'm just doing this for sake. Let's see. You can always move it down if you want. Universal. I'll do that at the end. Let's see. Escrow cost. I'm going to do alt detail just because we want to break out that prior that debt service fund. Okay? So, and again, you create all these different, and you modify, you move them around. You can always save. And I could say, quarter two advance report. See, this could be, you create as many. See, load it right there. So even if you go into a different project finance or you accidentally delete it, you can go back and load. So if I do view, oh, this will be good. I'll show you. Now, sometimes you'll want to do, and I want to show you this, you'll want to break out, let's see, not only annual, here, I'll do this, modify to summary, cost of issuance. Let's say that because I want to show you. Actually, you know what? Oh, anytime in a report, you, so for example, if we run the numbers and you view the sources and uses, you'll see, well, how do I know? I want to see the line item of my cost of issuance because I want to see if any of the rounding amount, right, additional proceeds. How do I know? I want to break that out. Well, you could view obviously the cost of issuance report, or, but if it's not going to show that, I want to print the details. You can select for either, for both, for example. So what you could do is any report that's in aggregate will show first, and then any summary style reports can then be broken out if you want on a per series basis. How do you do that? You need to make sure in print preferences. A lot of times it's either you do yes or multiple reports only, but the main thing is project finance. Make sure ordering of reports. The default is group by report. You do group by series. So group by series. I think if I do yes, let's see if the yes still works. Yep. So you put print preferences, not general, table of contents, yes. And then in the project finance, you want to group the reports by series, not by the report. That will break it out. We get this quite a bit. Hey, I have a project finance here. I'm trying to break out. I want to see all the aggregate there. Then I want to see the new money, and then I want to. And now you go, well, how does that know which order, right? If you say, well, I want to see the refundings, then the new money. Well, you can click and drag to show that first. I don't know if I need to calculate. I may have to calculate. Let's see if I have to calculate. Yeah, I do have to calculate. Now, this may or may not work. Sometimes when it gets allocated first. Nope. See, now you see after you calculate, you get the refund. So it's in the order. And you can click and drag. The other option is right mouse click, move left, move to the right. Okay. So you can either, click down and drag it and release, or move to the right, move to the left. Okay. So let's get back to the reports. So you can see it, the 2020 DSF, 100,000. Additional proceeds. So that broke it out. So obviously if we didn't have that, let me just show you. Get rid of that. and calculate it. Yep, see the rounding amount now. So you've seen this before. You see the slug purchases, cap I, debt service reserve fund, cost of issuance. And again, if you don't want to print details, by default, it's not. You just uncheck that, print preferences. Basically, when you see a report and you want to remove or add some, I would say number one, go to print preferences and go to the appropriate tab. This is just a summary of financing results. Breaks it all down kind of on one report. Summary of bonds refunded. Remember, these are the bonds. Remember the 7128 and 7130. It shows you. You've seen a lot of this from your savings. But again, so you can see here, present value back, each cash flow, and then it gets added together. That's why if you need to verify, view it like this. But I'll go back and I'll do savings. As long as you know that, then that's fine. So savings. This is showing you 1.52. This is level. And again, you probably won't look at your well, you may, because we'll get to the net debt service, but it's the solution. But this is fine. This is, again, as long as everything works, you're probably like, why do I need to view the bond solution? Most times you will. So less prior funds on hand, 100,000. We can always exclude that in the PRI icon, funds on hand. We can select apply to savings to NA. We can do cash flows, refunding funds on hand. That would be the debt service reserve fund. You can put that as a cash flow as well. So escrow requirements, the bonds that mature before the call date, and the interest. Now, there's a lot of rollover notes here. Most times, we're going to say, I don't really want rollovers. How do I resolve that? More times than not, go in here, slugs, proportional. Then if we go back, still the same, still level savings. There we go. Escrow descriptions. You don't see any zero rollovers. Escrow cash flow. And again, you can modify it to break it out per slug. It's very sufficient. Statistics, showing you statistics. Oh, escrow. Oh, forgot probably the most important. Where's the cost? It's weird. Okay, let's go back. Oh, I wonder if it's because it is cash flow sufficiency stats. Ah, that's why. So here's the escrow cost. Remember we had that 100,000 and we want to select first. That shows us, and it will break it down per yield, per portion of that escrow, and then fill remaining with bond proceeds. But this is on the cap I debt service project finance level. Okay. But you can see that's combined. That's why there's a big difference there. Universal bond solution. So this is the overall, basically the overall solution, right? And what's the existing debt of 201,591,009? That's the refund debt service, and we'll see that in a moment. What's the debt service adjustments? That's adjusting any kind of draws from the CAPI and the reserve fund to get overall level 15 million and change. Now, here, let me put this back on. And then I'm going to do no. This will just make it easier to view. Savings, yep, cost, cash, statistics, yep, net debt service. So that's breaking it out. So you'll go, wait a minute, the refunding, right? That's not giving me level saving, level net savings. Well, remember, we didn't change anything on the refund side. We just said solve it level gross, like level debt service savings. How do we adjust? That's why if here's the refunding. See, we'll see here. It's just solving off of prior debt service, new debt service. There's no adjustments of any CAPI or reserve fund. That's why it's important to view the bond solution / universal bond solution. Now you know why. You're like, oh, I don't see the adjustment. What do I? Oh, I know what to do. I'll go into the refund because remember, it's not solved in the universal bond solution. Now I'll do adjust debt service. Hopefully this will work. Okay. Now, let's see a little bit different. Okay. So, yep, savings. Now we got, is that doing it different? I think because it is, what is the difference there? Well, let's look. Cash flow sufficiency, net debt service. Oh, yeah. Because we don't have the reserve fund. We need to include that. So this is another good, you'll look at net debt service, it's level, right? But, and then you'll see your bond solution 1.9. Well, that looks great. Unused revenues is savings, difference between the revenue constraint, prior debt service, and the new debt. 1.9 all the way down. But as you can see, that's the new money, that's fine. The net debts is, what is that? That's the refunding level savings. So why are we not getting, let me see. Okay, it's 14 million there. That's combined. Okay, that works. So we'll go back to the savings and go, why is that not? Well, we're only comparing prior and the refunding debt service. Remember, we're the solution, we're adjusting the reserve and the CAPI. That's not being shown here. So how do we do that? Go here, and go reserve fund, cash flow to maturity. Now let's see if that works. Hopefully it does. Should at least get us closer. Okay. Here we go. 1.9. Now, why is it not showing? Close, print, preferences, savings. I want to do expanded. You can do, if you want to do annual PV, stuff like that. So if I go, okay, now view. So again, you ever have questions about a report? Why is it not showing this or that? A lot of times, print preferences, go to the relative, tab, and now you'll see it. Now this refunding receipts. We're adjusting any kind of CAPI draws and any kind of reserve fund interest earnings and the release. So we see the prior new in the 1.9 million and change. That is level net savings. So as you can see, sometimes not viewing, the savings report is just going to show you the comparisons, depending if it's on simple or expanded. But the bond solution report and the universal bond solution report, very key, because that will show you what's included, what's not included in the solution. And that can at least get you started on the right path if something is, see, this is all the way down. In aggregate, let me just add, sorry, one more important, and I'm going to modify it to annual. There we go. Okay, net debt service on an aggregate basis, 14 points. Okay, that's level. Now that's on the refund. What is not being included? Let's see, 6. Oh, because we're getting, it's for level savings. Yeah, that's right. And then, okay, new money, that's on the 4th. Oh, because in overall, it's trying to solve for level net, not on an individual basis. That makes sense. So the net debt service on the aggregate is their objective, and that's been met. Okay. Aggregate. Now, what is the new money aggregate level overall? So let's see, previous. So here's the bond solution 1.9, and then the universal. That's getting us 14 point, okay, through 65, right? Okay, total 14.7. Let's see, debt service. So the existing is the refund. Okay, and that's going to 65, 588. Oh, this is showing more. This is going from 20. Let's see, 26, right? Oh, is this not including, let's see, 26 through 65. Yep. Why is that? See, that is gone. Existing. So that should be 14.12. Oh, it's because it's not including the, that's for aggregate net debt service. I need to get the aggregate nets. That's why, because it's not netting out. It's not netting out the reserve fund and cap buy. So that's fine. I can get that in a bit. I think I've got, let me see if I have the aggregate net debt service. Let's see here. Aggregate. DBC data, customer reports, aggregate net debt service. Yeah, I'm gonna try that. I'm hoping that may or may not work. I may have to find another. We actually do have an aggregate net debt service that is, but this might be a custom that I did. Yeah, no, that's not going to do it. Let's see. Where is it? Samples folder. Sorry about this. Let's see. Import. Ag. On. Aggregate. No. There we go. There we go. That's if you ever have to, now this may, yeah, 14.7, aggregate net debt service. That's another thing I would recommend you guys. We do have some custom reports. A couple things. One is in print preferences, you'll have some hidden reports that you can look through depending on the module. Another is wherever DBC was downloaded or installed. Um, I would say typically, or at least on mine, it's the program, DBC Finance through program files. You'll see, program files, DBC, then you'll see finance, then you'll see a samples folder. And in the samples folder is our report, custom reports like aggregate net debt service, TIC proof, all in TIC proof. I think those are the main ones. And how do you import? You'd go to tools, define custom reports, and click import. And then you'd have to search for where DBC is installed. And again, a lot of times it could be in, some shared drive, maybe program files. Now mine is not, I don't believe, let's see, where was mine? DBC, finance, and then you'll see a folders. Mine, I removed mine a long time ago, but you'll see a folders. And then you'll go in there and you'll see a .dcl file and you double click to import it. And you'll see it then import, you select and then go save and close. And then when you go to print, you can view it down here. Now, everyone good so far on, let's see. Yep. Think everyone's good so far? Okay. We might as well keep this going for just a little bit more. I know it's, what is it? It's supposed to be for what, 3 hours? 30. Got another 10 minutes or so. Obviously, I can stay longer if you need me to. If you ever do sensitivity analysis, so, for example, this refund case, you may have projected differences like in escrow yields or bond yields. You can always go to file. It's called Calc Agent. Okay. And this is where you can go in and you can select a certain so there's no changes, for example, and you can say base case, right? And let's just say if there's a minus point, 0.5, I'm going to do something minus 0.1, minus 0.1 BP, minus 0.5 BP, plus 1 BP, plus, plus 1 BP, and then minus, plus 0.5 BP. This is kind of a, quick and dirty, but including aggregate ARP, probably just say no, because I'm going to view them on a separate. But what you can do is it calls sensitivity analysis, and you can even bond yield adjustments, rate and yield, or just one or the other. But what you can do is you can say, look, if there's any kind of changes in the bond yield or escrow yield, what are the results, right? And you can say calculate, and you can pretty much view any report, do breakdown, Calc Agent, and then you can even say, oh, I want to see what the results will look like for my savings, and I want to break that out on a per. So this was the base case, and we can always change these for, reporting. So this is the base case doing nothing. And then you'll see what the results. So you can view any report by just doing a sensitivity analysis where you can adjust rates, or bond yields or bond rates or the escrow yields, and see what those results happen to be. And you'll see here with, here's the base case doing nothing. 46.5 million net, right? And then obviously that goes up with each negative coupon, right? And or each addition add to it, then it's going to reduce. And then you can view these -1. Here's the results. You get 1.9 million a year, 61.3, 69.9. Here's the current. See how they go down. So that's kind of a quick showing you of file calc agent for sensitivity analysis. And again, F1 in here, it talks about powerful feature. You can combine multiple series refunding, financing to get aggregate reports, batch runs, and so forth. But that's kind of I don't believe it's always covered. If you click save on that. So that's at least kind of, that shows you on a project finance level how you can incorporate different series. You can solve, in this case, level savings, and then an aggregate debt service. In this case, net debt service. So I don't know if it's quite a bit of info, but that's really what I wanted to touch on today. And definitely when I get a chance to kind of edit and clean it up, then I will post it. I will also can email you guys to let you know. Even if I hadn't, we still have prior to last week, different trainings that have appeared that you can go through, but I will try to get that done sooner rather than later. Does anybody have any questions?
Cade, I just wanted to say thank you so much for walking us through all of this. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I know it can get a little, it's probably not the most interesting stuff, but I appreciate it. And I just always I know there's only so much you can go through until you start to maybe tune out or zone out, but hopefully this helps. And,
no, it was it was helpful. And, a couple of us on the call right now, we're a little new to